Have you ever wondered how weather people predict the weather? Well, there's a lot that goes into it. Some of the methods that meteorologists use to predict the weather include looking at numerical models, looking at the climatology or the history of the weather for that area, and also looking at upper air charts. However, one of the most important things that meteorologists use to predict the weather are surface observations. So even though a lot of the weather is happening above us, there's a lot that can be told from here at the surface. The recipe for weather is not a simple one. There's a lot of variables that go into it. And at the surface, a lot of these can be measured by hand using specialized tools. So what parameters are at the surface and how exactly do we measure them? Well, these special tools can be used to measure the wind, thermodynamic variables, and the present weather conditions. First of all, it's good to know how to take a good wind measurement. So there's two different things that you measure for wind. The first thing would be its direction. Now, there's a very primitive way to measure the wind direction using something called a wind ribbon. Here in this picture, you can see how it's used. Now, as you see, you just stand with the wind at your back and the ribbon blowing in front of your face. Then, use a compass to tell which direction the wind ribbon is pointing. This tells you the direction that the wind is going. However, to give a name to the actual wind, you have to say from where it's coming from. So if the ribbon was pointing towards the south, it would actually be a northerly wind. The second thing to measure for wind would be the magnitude, or the speed. Now, you need more specialized tools to measure this than you did for the direction. One of the most popular tools to measure wind speed is the Kestrel. Here in this picture are very different models of the Kestrel. To use this instrument, you hold it in the air and you let the wind blow through it. As the wind moves through, this little fan will spin. The instrument itself can then calculate the speed of this wind based on how fast it spins in a specific amount of time. The second surface observation that we can take by hand would be the thermodynamic variables. This consists of the temperature, the relative humidity, and the pressure. First of all, to measure the temperature, you would use a thermometer, like the one here. Thermometers can either be electric or they can be liquid like this one. Both of them provide very accurate readings of the temperature of the air at the surface. The second thermodynamic variable that you would measure would be the relative humidity. To measure this variable, you would use an instrument called a sling psychrometer, shown here. This is a very interesting instrument. It contains two different thermometers. There's one like the one I just showed you on the previous picture, and then there's another that has a sort of cotton or fabric wick on top. To use this instrument, you would wet the wick and then hold the base of it and spin it in the air, kind of like a lasso. Now, as it's spinning, water is going to evaporate from that cotton wick, which makes that thermometer read a lower temperature. At the end of the measurement taking, you look at the difference between the two measurements, and using a scale on the instrument, you can calculate what the relative humidity or the amount of moisture in the air is. The last thermodynamic variable of interest is the pressure. Pressure can be measured using a barometer or a handheld version of it that measures it electronically. Now, the reason that we want to measure pressure is to see if it's any different than the normal pressure it is in your area. Every single place on Earth has its own typical pressure based on its elevation. This is its pressure above or below sea level. Now, using a barometer, we can tell if the pressure is above or higher than normal, or if it's below or lower than normal. When we know this value and how the difference is, we can see what associated weather comes along with it. For higher pressure than normal, there's usually fair weather or nothing really exciting happening. This has to do with a lot of sinking air. However, when there's lower pressure than normal, you know that there's a lot of rising air and convection, which can lead to rainy or stormy weather coming your way. And now that we've measured different things and talked about how we can take observations using tools, we move on to the category of measurements that don't require any special tools at all. To observe the present weather conditions, all you need is your body and your eyes. To do this, all you do is go outside. Outside, you can see how hot or dry it feels, how breezy it is, if there's any precipitation falling, and lastly, the sky cover. According to the National Weather Service, There's specific terms you use to describe the sky condition based on what percentage of the sky is covered by clouds. They use a 1/8 or eighth of the sky system. So a clear sunny sky would be less than 1/8 full of clouds. A mostly sunny sky would be between 1/8 and 3/8. A sunny sky would be between 3/8 and 4/8. And a mostly cloudy sky would be between 5/8 and 7/8. Now, a cloudy or overcast day would be granted when almost the entire sky is full of clouds. So it's between 7/8 and 8/8 full. So we've seen that without any instruments at all, we can tell a lot about the surface conditions and the weather that's going on and what may come. So as I've described, there's many different tools we can use and many different variables we can measure. But let's summarize. A good starting observation would be the wind. You can do its speed and its direction. Next, the thing you would measure would be the thermodynamic variables. This would be the temperature, the relative humidity, or the pressure. And lastly, using your special tool of your body and your eyes, you measure the current or present weather conditions. So what precipitation is falling, how hot or dry it feels, how windy it is, and lastly, what the sky condition is. It's really easy to pull up a weather app or even watch a weather segment on the news. However, a lot of the things that they tell us we can measure at home by hand. There are many different meteorological tools that are available to us and that we can easily use ourselves in our own backyards. And with practice, by taking different meteorological measurements at home, we can begin to see patterns and maybe even make our own little forecasts. Thank you.